Okay, so now we're going to transition it into our what's being slept on topic for the week, which is
feminism. And so I was really excited about this topic because I feel like there's so many different variations of feminism, there's a lot of confusion as to not only what feminism is, but where feminism came from and what feminism does. And so I wanted to start this conversation by talking about someone that I have a love, not a hate, but a love and like, girl, what relationship? And that's with Amber Rose. And so I follow her on IG. I was all down for her on 21 Savage.
You are a minority.
I feel like sometimes she has good points. She makes good points in terms of saying that there's a double standard in how men and women are perceived. Mm-hmm. So men can be sexy, men can be sexual, and that's good. But if women are sexy and women are sexual, then they're sluts. And so she has this thing called a slut walk, and she does it yearly. And so at Coachella, she was with the squad. And one of the reasons that I stand more behind Amber Rose is because she's an advocate for the LGBT community. And so in her squad, she has gay men, and they were all wearing cheerleading outfits. And on the front of the cheerleading outfits, it said slut. And so her kind of thing is taking back slut, owning it, making it yours, so that and it's not just something that happens with the word slut, but something that happens with other words too, where people feel like they can get empowered by taking back that word and using it themselves and reframing it and making it mean something else. And so for her, she wants to take back slut, and instead of making it negative, making it positive. But sometimes I just feel like what she claims is feminism isn't exactly doing anything to advance issues of feminism. And so I wonder, and one of the things that I talk about is, as a health researcher, are the high mortality rates of Black women, and so specifically the high maternal mortality rates. And so in the United States, Black women have really high percentages of dying at giving birth, and then within a year after they give birth, which is a really sensitive time. And what's bad, other than Black women dying, is that it's a really, really high percentage compared to other countries that we consider quote unquote less developed. Mm-hmm. So for a country like the United States that has has some of the best technology in terms of medical technology, so many Black women are dying from things that they could easily, and I think Serena Williams actually talked about this, about how she could have died. Yeah. And so when I hear things like that, and I see like Amber Rose as a Black woman, like, why is it only sexuality stuff? Why is it only like, I can be sexy, I have a right to be sexy? Why is it not like, let's educate people about this issue, let's do something about this issue? Black women like me are dying giving birth. I'm a mother.
I'm sure she doesn't even know.
Yeah, and that could be a point too, is that she may not know. And so that's why I'm conflicted. And so it got me thinking, like, okay, if I don't think that Amber Rose is all the time promoting causes that I would argue are important for feminism, then one, what is feminism? And two, what is the agenda? What is the feminist agenda? What is it that we're seeking? And so I wanted to start off this conversation by just putting on the table and saying, like, what is feminism? Because I don't know if I think a lot of people think they know what it means, but it's one of those things that once you start asking people, you'll see that there's different variations of what they think it is.
Yeah, I think pretty generally I would say that feminism is not Amber Rose and what she's doing, and it isn't the slut walk. I mean, I think that the cause that she's so passionate about is an important one. And it's a reality, like you're saying, that there's a double standard. But I don't think that Amber Rose is doing anything about it in the way that she thinks that she is. I don't even know if she thinks that she is. Because for all Amber is doing is exercising her right to be naked. Which nobody was getting in the way of that before. No fewer people are calling you a slut or whatever than were doing it before. And so for Amber Rose, I remember last year where she put up the picture of her naked with
with her
vagina out. Yeah. Uh-huh. And so I think that and the caption was like feminism or something like that. And Instagram took it down. Yeah. And then she posted a video of herself talking about, oh, when Instagram takes down your feminist photo, but it's already gone viral and been reposted everywhere. And it was like, okay, Amber, good job. People would have taken that photo, reposted it. Hella people probably got it as their screenshot, right, or the screensaver right now, and they would have done it regardless of the feminism caption. Nobody cared. Instagram did not see it as a feminist photo. They saw it as you being naked, which they don't allow. And so I guess maybe another thing that she was trying to highlight was that she had pubic hair. And so that was like this big thing because women, I don't know, I guess pubic hair is not feminine or sexy these days.
Yeah, people think that being like naked is what's sexy.
Like no, like hairless.
Yeah, like no. I mean hairless.
Yeah, and I think that that's perfectly fine, but I do not think that that's this super like controversial thing that you're doing. Like you're not knocking down doors or opening doors for women by having this slut walk. Mm-hmm. Like it's just not happening. And so like you're saying with Serena Williams and you know, she has like thrown a lot of money at organizations and nonprofit orgs where the crisis of Black women and the maternal mortality rates are a central focus. And I do think that is core to what feminism is. But along with that, I think that what I am more inclined to identify with and what appeals to me more are the tenets of intersectionality theory. And I think that I've always kind of subscribed to that even before knowing even before knowing the word intersectionality. Mm-hmm. You know, like I think that I always kind of felt uncomfortable in learning about, you know, feminist movements and kind of being like, well, that those motivations sound mainstream and middle class and white. A lot of the like central focus and motivations for the feminist movement, especially early on, like I just never identified with it. And it was something that I also didn't feel comfortable saying out loud because I'm like, okay, what kind of progressive woman am I to be like, I don't know about this doesn't sound like it's for me, you know? And so I think that there is a lot of division within the feminist movement today. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because there are so many different people that identify as feminist across different disciplines and fields, but there's no consensus about what the motivation is. So you have like academics and academic feminism, and then you have people like Amber Rose, or like, maybe I shouldn't group all the celebrities together because you like Beyonce identifies as a feminist, and I wouldn't put her in the same group as Amber Rose. Yeah. And then you have like intersectionality theorists and scholars like Kimberly Crenshaw and Patricia Hill Collins. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's kind of been like my lane. And then you have, you know, practitioners and stuff like that who I think that maybe Patricia Hill Collins and Kimberly Crenshaw would also kind of identify themselves as such. And then there are a ton of practitioners whose names I don't know because, I mean, my academic bias. But, I mean, those people are also important, but I think that they all have different ideas of what feminism is. Mm-hmm. So if you want to, like, walk us through those waves.
Yeah. So, first, just to give a little overview, this is a topic that I wanted to talk about. One, because gender and sexuality is, like, our bread and butter. Yeah. It's like what we actually choose to study. Mm-hmm. And so just giving a little historical overview, first wave feminism was in the 19th and earliest 20th century. So that's like the 1900s up until the 1950s. And so the focus of first wave feminism was on women's suffrage, meaning women's right to vote, women's right to have property, and women's right to run for office. And but the problematic thing for that is 1910 to 1950, it was mostly focused on the issues of white women, and most of the women who were kind of highlighted and who are always recalled as these are, you know, our founding mothers are white women, even though I don't think I can't believe that there weren't women of color who were also like, yo, I want to vote. But the ones that we mostly highlight in history and the ones we mostly talk about in pop culture are white women.
Yeah, whatchamacallit, Sojourner Truth has that speech published, Ain't I Woman?
Yeah.
And one, at the time, Black people weren't even considered human, let
That's
alone
true.
like being given the
Yeah.
right. Like, you can't have the right to vote if you're not even considered human.
Yeah.
But then at this time of first wave feminism, white women were viewed or kind of seen as being on the same level as children, and like needing to have a man to support them and guide them and make sure that they didn't like just trip over and fall, I guess.
Like they
or
weren't,
catch a chill.
Yeah, like they weren't like they weren't capable
Yeah.
of making decisions and of doing things.
Which is why marriage rates, or the age of marital entry was so young then, because it was like, okay, well, your parents and your dad are taking care of you, but you can't just be let out into the world. You got to transition from your father to your husband, which is why they have that ceremony and weddings and all of that. But that's a whole other story.
So first wave feminism is like, okay, let's vote, let's own property. That's all cool. Second wave feminism we have around 1960s through 1980s, and that focused mostly in reducing inequalities in family, in the workplace. So here we have women entering the labor market. We have more women going to college, using their degrees, getting jobs, and also abortion. And so that was a lot of the motivating there, was women's right to be able to claim to make decisions over their own bodies.
Did you say birth control?
Oh, and birth control. So birth control and abortion, just like overall reproductive rights.
Yeah.
And I think this is what most people are familiar with, like the 60s, abortion, birth control, sexuality. Here's when we have, if you watch movies where they have like the housewife in the 60s reading, their magazines, trying to get like empowered. So that's, I think, what people are more familiar with. And then we have third wave feminism, which is from 1990s to about 2008, something around that time. Again, these are just like time intervals that people have created, but I'm sure that there's a little bit of sway there. But in third wave feminism, focusing mostly on embracing diversity, and this is where we have people like Kimberly Crenshaw and Patricia Hill Collins kind of calling into attention that the voices of non-white women have kind of been pushed to the side, and the agenda seems to really put forward a lot of issues that impact middle-class white women and not women who don't share those experiences. And then there apparently is a fourth wave feminism that is all the way from 2008 through 2010. And I say apparently because I don't feel like we've quite gotten past the embracing diversity in feminism.
No. I think that there's some stuff that I've read that says that we're still in third wave right now.
Yeah. So I would consider us still kind of third wave, but I guess like the next kind of wave, which is generated by something we're going to talk about, which is focusing on combating sexual harassment and sexual assault. So I think that like things like the Me Too movement and stuff like that, where we're particularly focused on sexual violence against women, on assault on campus, on Chapter 9, things like that, where we're specifically focusing on sexual assault and violence, is fourth wave feminism. But so that's the chronology of feminism. And I think that many people generally would say that feminism is promoting the equality among gender, so that men and women are equal. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a definition that a lot of people get behind, and that's one that I've heard most commonly in mainstream, is that I'm all about equality. I'm all about being equal. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to pose to you, Ebony, like, to you, do you consider yourself a feminist? And if you do, then what does your feminism look like?
No.
Okay.
I don't. And I think that I haven't really said that to many people out loud, just because, I'm mostly in academic settings. Mm-hmm. And I think that in academia, it is being a woman equals being feminist.
Yeah.
And I think that even a lot of men in academia would probably identify as feminism, just because academia, for the most part, is viewed as a pretty progressive and liberal space where you're supposed to be interested in equality for everyone. So if that means gender equality, and if we are saying that, or if the general kind of assumption is that feminism means gender equality, then I think that most academics identify as feminists. But similar to the kind of what you laid out in the different waves, Like, I don't subscribe to feminism because I don't think that, even as much as we try to push for it, even as much as women of color try to interject themselves and we try to, or even, I mean, mainstream feminism is not just, in my opinion, racist, but also classist. So a lot of the concerns that motivated the kind of start of the feminist movement are concerns, like you said, that white middle class women had. So if you think about where feminism started and wanting women to have the right, or like the labor force rights. So there was a time when women supposedly couldn't or didn't work, and they were kind of just left to take care of the home. Like, that was their job. And which is, I mean, people might hear that called like unpaid domestic labor. But at this time when these women were pushing for this right to work, and right to equality in the labor force, and the right to be seen as more than just a wife and a mother, women of color were working and had been working for a long time.
Yeah.
Like, we can't forget that in this country, Black women were also slaves. And they were doing a lot of time the same work that the men were doing. And so, this concern about, like, oh my God, I don't want to be relegated to the house, and I don't want to be just a wife, and I don't want to be just a kid, just a mother. Black women didn't have that concern or that ability to choose between the two. Like, it was like, no, you work. That's what you do. And because a lot of the time, the men, especially, like, say during slavery, right, men were taken from their families and sold, like, the families were broken apart and the men are sold off somewhere else. So it's the mom being the mother and working. So it wasn't, she didn't have the opportunity or the privilege to be a wife. So there was no choice to be made. And I think that a lot of the assumptions that underlied the start of the movement have kind of been maintained, but in silence. So, if you think about, like, this last election, and when you think about who, like, what women voted for Donald Trump. What women voted for Donald Trump? White women. And so it's like, y'all, like, there is no sisterhood there. Like, where was feminism there when you decided, I'm not gonna check the box for the woman, the first woman that has a chance at the presidential office. I'm not gonna, I think that even if you don't like her, the fact that she could have been the first woman president and you didn't even feel charged up enough to help that happen is enough to let me know that we are not a part of the same movement. So no, like, I don't do feminism. I'm all for gender equality. I think that I identify much more with intersectionality, and I think that it's just because in the way that I study it, in the way that I employ it in my research, accounts for race and class in a way that mainstream feminism does not. Like, they just don't get behind those issues. You don't hear them, like, if you think about the Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas case in the 90s, like, where were the feminists then? When she was, dealing with sexual assault, like, and harassment, like, they weren't there. And so, and I think also, what is the, recently with the Me Too movement, when Lupita came forward and said, like, oh yeah, I've had similar issues. Where were the feminists then? The Me Too movement wasn't even like, it was like a joke to them. Like, oh, this black woman, because black women are viewed as hypersexual. And so it's like, oh, well, if you had this kind of attention, you must have done something to ask for it. You must have asked for it. You must have done something that made him think that this was okay. But it's like, oh no, like, poor, like, little white actresses, like, they were attacked. We need somebody to come and protect them and defend them. But I feel like, for a lot of women of color, they're not granted that same level of, like, I don't know what that is, like, concern or, yeah.
Okay.
Well, that was a long-winded
No,
answer to
no,
say
and
no.
I think it's really fair because I think, like what you said, a lot of people aren't comfortable, especially well, generally, I think if you're a woman and you say you're not a feminist, people look at you like, oh, so you just want to stay at home? Yeah. And I think in academia, if you say you're not a feminist, then people look at you, especially studying gender and sexuality, people look at you like, oh, are you confused? Mm-hmm. And so for me, I do consider myself a feminist, but I find like I encounter issues all the time. And so I think that one of the things that you really highlighted, that is where it's most of my contention, is like I feel that the issues that affect women of color are always overlooked, and that mainstream feminism, and when we mean mainstream, we just mean like popular, like what is majority of people, don't really see the issues that I'm most concerned about in terms of like mothers being separated from their children when they're through these mass deportations, like Trump making policies of family separation.
What? Mainstream white feminists would never.
No.
What? They would never put their necks out there to say we need to keep
woman
mothers with their children.
Yeah,
never.
So I always feel like sometimes it feels like what would be expected is for me to put my issues that are relevant to me and important to me, to the side in order to address what's most right now. I think what's really guiding the conversation in feminism, which is Me Too, sexual assault. But I think that you bring a good point in terms of like white feminism. And when we talk about white feminism, we're talking about like, as I kind of described in the chronology of feminism, it started with like a lot of white women addressing a lot of issues that were impacting them, because as you said, like women of color, and especially black women, were already working. They already were treated really horribly. And so when I see, like, for example, Lena Dunham, she is a white woman.
As much as I love girls.
I actually never seen it. She's a white woman who's a feminist, and she recently wrote an article on Vogue. Vogue loves letting her write stuff. And so she wrote an article of Vogue about which I read both, because I'm the type of person that, like, if I'm going to criticize you, I'm going to read about what you say so I can criticize you. I wrote two of her articles. One was about how she had a hysterectomy. And
she did.
Yeah, she had to get one because of medical issues, and how her response was like, in this medical setting, in this world, you're viewed as like really horrible if you make the decision to take out your reproductive organs. And so I felt her with that. I was like, yeah, women are always viewed as like, you cannot be fulfilled unless you have a child. Yeah. So I read that article. I was like, okay, we're about the same age. I can totally understand.
Oh, is she?
She's like our age.
Oh, I did not
know that. In her 20s. And so the second article I read was about her saying that she understands that the internet hates her teeth. It was legit about how she had this huge insecurity about her teeth. People really just gave her so much shit about her teeth. How it was really like a reflection of just how women are once again only like looked at, you're only important to be pretty. And I'm kind of thinking
she should do like Cardi. She has a bag. Like,
I know, but I mean, I was just like, so Vogue let her write this article about her teeth.
Nobody cares.
And yet there are, like, I read a story about a woman who was separated from her child while they were getting separated through deportation, and that, like, no one gives a shit about. Or high mortality rates. Or the fact that, women are losing reproductive rights. So sometimes...
Or the fact that, what about when they were... in DC when they were giving black women those shots that were preventing them from having that were making them infertile?
Oh shit, no.
Yeah, let me look that story up, because I think that was like a year or two ago. It wasn't even that long ago.
Oh my god. But historically we've done that to people.
Yeah, but it's like when would like these the poster child, I'm not even sure who the faces are. Obviously
she's
celebrities.
She's a poster child. Lena Dunham
or
is
like
a poster
Amy
child.
Schumer, who like she cannot
Amy
get
Schumer.
over. Like, girl, you're a little thick. It's fine.
And her new movie's coming out where she's exactly talking about that, about how you should be comfortable with your own bodies. And I'm like, I totally get that, Amy Schumer, but there are also like real issues happening to women of color. So when I encounter things like families being separated through deportation in my community, and then I go on Vogue and I see that Lena Dunham wrote an article about her teeth, I'm kind of like, is this really what feminist? And the fact that it's in Vogue is like, who reads Vogue? Like, who's going to go online and read Vogue other than me to like look at what Lena Dunham's writing? But like, I think the demographic for Vogue is white. I think that, and why I think that is because of the content that they have. They always highlight like Gwyneth Paltrow. They always highlight Lena Dunham. They always highlight Kim Kardashian. And I'm just thinking, it's just really frustrating for me to try to like carve out a space within feminism and say that I want to bring the voices of my community, but then just everywhere I look, all I'm getting is signals that say, but this isn't what's important to us. And so I think that although I consider myself a feminist today, I honestly have had very difficult conversations with myself where I'm like in the same boat you are, and I'm like, I feel like in my own work, I'm addressing issues of race, issues of the intersections of sexual orientation and gender, but I don't feel that when I go out to a women's march that the issues that I'm most concerned about are the issues that most of the women in that crowd even know or are concerned about. So, and then kind of feeling left out and feeling like, is there space for me? Is there space for Zama in this feminism?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if anything, if I were to identify in any way with feminism, I would have to preface it with black. I would, and you know, I think that a lot of black women that, like, you know, friends and stuff have, you know, kind of gone in that direction, in order to find, like you're saying, space for themselves in the feminist movement. They've had to identify as black feminists to separate themselves from the mainstream movement. And so I think that when knowing what feminism actually is and what it's actually supposed to do, I could technically identify with that version of feminism. But because I know that if I do give myself this label, I will be kind of grouped in with these women like Amy Schumer and like Lena Dunham. Like, I don't see myself represented in their movement, and I don't think that the definition that they have of their movement, the concerns that they have, include people like me. Yeah. I just really don't think it's of concern to them, and I think that for the women's march, one of the big questions that people had was like, well, you know, you see a lot of diversity at this women's march that was organized predominantly by white women, but where are these same white women at marches and kind of demonstrations that are put together and organized by people of color? You don't see them. You don't see them.
You don't see them at DACA rallies. You don't see them at Black Lives Matter protests.
And you wouldn't because that's not their concern. I think that right now the biggest concern for the feminist movement is wage equality, which I think is important. But meanwhile, you have black women founding movements like Black Lives Matter, where they aren't even. Black Lives Matter is not even women centric. Yeah. So like they're seeing an issue that's plaguing their community, plaguing men in their community, men who are sons, fathers, brothers, you know, husbands, grandfathers, etc., etc. They are prioritizing. Black women are putting together a movement that prioritizes men in their community, men who are potentially their loved ones, and so I think that that I think to me just kind of underscores what our focuses are. You know, like Amy Schumer's concerned about her body image, which body image is important. Like, I don't want to discount that because I know that is an important concern. But when you have another group of people whose primary concern is, you know, the death of men in their community, or the deportation of parents in their community, like we just have to have different concerns. We can't be worried about that. We can't afford to. We can't afford to, because if we don't speak up for us, no one else will. And we see that. That's we know how, like, for instance, black women know how the world views black men, and we know that a movement for black men, led by black men, would be muted. And so we are seen as, by the world as problematic, but a little bit less so. Like we're still problematic, but we're not dangerous. And so they'll allow us to start a movement. They'll allow us to be the face of a movement. And that's my focus. And as long as mainstream feminism is not concerned about it, I'm not concerned about it.
Yeah. And I think that goes into, and one of the issues that I had was like, can you be intersectional and not a feminist? And I bring that up because I went to a conference that was specifically on intersectionality. And the panel was 2 white women and 1 black woman. And they all gave the presentations. And at the end, they do question and answers. One of the questions was, are you a feminist? Which I was surprised. I know, I was surprised. And I was glad this happened, though, because of the response.
Whoa.
And so the 2 white women took their turn, and they're like, of course. The black woman stood up and said, no, I'm not. Didn't give an explanation, just said, no, I'm not. And you could tell that the people were like, oh, what? And I think that the person who asked the question, I forgot if she was white or not, because I just can't get past the response of the black woman in the room being silent. But I think that it just highlights, like, the white women were for reals, like, oh my gosh, what? Why is she here? Like, you could tell they were, like, hella concerned, and I was just, like, thinking about you, and you being someone who is an intersectional, someone who uses the intersectional framework in their work and considers themselves an intersectionalist, but not a feminist. I'm like, okay, so that is possible, not only because I saw it in a conference, but because you're here and you're telling me that. And so I think that, What do you think? Like, do you think that maybe more people should be able to feel more comfortable? Is that just another kind of issue that we have as women of color, where we don't even feel comfortable saying to white women that, like, I'm not aligned with you? And does that also highlight that, like, white women are so naive as to how we feel, that they are so oblivious that they're kind of like, oh, wait, you don't feel included?
Yeah. No, I think that story is just so funny to me, because I'm always so amused. I wish that I had more of that courage. I'm always so amused and in just kind of like sheer adoration for women of color that don't care about disturbing the peace. They don't care about making, like, I love women of color that do not care about making white people uncomfortable. And I think that's important. I do think it's important, and I think that I am growing in my comfort and willingness to do that, just because I recognize that these people ain't gonna give me nothing that I didn't work for. And they do, while they do have the capacity to take it away, at the end of the day, minorities, and especially poor minorities, are creative as heck, and I think that I've inherited a lot of that. So even if they did try to, like, say in academic spaces, try to take away something or discredit me because I said something, I'll just find another outlet. So coming to that realization has been a 4-year long, well, I would say maybe 3.5, because I think I've kind of been in this space for, like, at least the last 6 months. But it was a 3-year long period where I, felt like, all right, I need to, as the black girl, I need to not be loud. I need to not be a stereotype, And so, I really like that story, and I wish I knew that woman's name, because I think that that's awesome for her to be able to do that.
And looking back, I feel what you're saying, and I think that sometimes people, in order to really contextualize our experience, is that it's actually, like, being in academia And being a woman, we're already a small percentage.
Yeah.
But being a woman of color, we're an even smaller percentage.
Even in our department.
And even, specifically, even in our department. Which,
and at our school.
Which,
like,
it actually, compared to other departments, has a little more diversity, a little more color. But still, like, there are times where I am the only Latina in a room. And they're talking about immigration. Yeah. And so, like, there's white people talking about deportation rates and then just, like, going and having lunch at Chipotle.
Yeah.
And I'm, like, sitting there being like, yeah, my stepdad's been deported before. My mom's came here illegally, and, I mean, so technically so did I. And just thinking, like, I am not on this. I just don't feel like this is my space. And so I'm not there yet where I feel like I can really tell people, like, nah, your feminism isn't my feminism. And I would like
people that.
I would like to be.
Yeah.
And I think that this podcast is a good way for us to be able to, like, it's really hard for women of color in academia to have a voice because sometimes it's either uncomfortable or it takes a lot of emotional, like, work to be able to not only say that, but to be okay with the responses. And so I feel like it was really important for us to have this conversation about feminism because I just know that a lot of people are going to be surprised at, like, things that we talk about because there's this assumption that you do gender work, you do sexuality work, so you're on the same page as everyone else who says that they're a feminist, that you are. And me identifying as a feminist, I think that people assume that I'm totally on board with everything, that I support everyone who's a feminist, that I have, I'm going to go out there to the women marches and be super happy, but really trying to find a space so that we can say that there are a lot of issues that feminism and mainstream feminism is not addressing within our communities, and that results in us feeling like we need additional spaces to be able to voice these issues that we have and that are important to us.
I think another thing, I can recall a few instances where I have I don't know. I think that it is also hard and I'm not sure if you feel this way too. I'm not sure if we were getting to this, but I think that oftentimes I'll speak directly to about Black women experiences. So the experiences of Black women often get lost in a lot of movements. So movements that are about race. And movements that are race-based and movements that are gender-based. And because race-based movements tend to focus on or highlight issues facing men. So, like, even, for instance, in terms of mass incarceration, right? Like, tons of Black women are in prison, but that's never a part of the conversation. Those women often have their children taken away from them, put in foster care. There are a lot of women that have their babies in prison. A lot of times those women or their babies die. That's not part of the conversation. That focus is on Black men. And then on the other hand, for instance, like gender-based movements like the feminist movement. So Black women's concerns are not central to that movement. And so a lot of times I find myself, because I think that the issues that are plaguing me most and the people that I care about most are race-based issues. I tend to lean into those issues and to push those issues, and that's where I find myself getting the most outraged. But now that I'm sitting here thinking about it as we're talking about it, I recognize that neither of those movements are focused on me or Black women.
Concerns.
So I don't think so. I mean, I'm problematizing the feminist movement, and I know that right now the conversation is not about race-based movements, but I do think that is worth mentioning, that it's not like the Black Lives Matter movement is any more concerned about me than the feminist movement is.
And I totally feel that. I mean, sometimes I even feel like, I speak a whole different language, and there are days where I go without speaking Spanish to anyone, and I feel like it's very isolating, and it's very, like, I just feel like I have a connection with people that share similar experiences to me, and you say that the thing that you focus, that there are certain things that draw you most and that are race-based, and for me, what draws me most is immigration, and that's because, like, people are physically being removed from this country and at alarming rates, and not just people, but like children and mothers, and not just children and mothers, but like people I know and like people that I love and people that are in my family. And I just it's just sometimes really frustrating to be like, well, do I have to go with immigration people for them to care about these issues? But there are issues that concern women, and so I want to talk about that, and feeling like there might not be a space, because like even some people don't consider me Latina as a race, they consider it as an ethnicity, and so sometimes I feel like I don't know where to go, and so that's why I just lumped myself to feminism, because I felt like, well, generally I can talk about gender things, but I feel like more recently, and this is totally due to the Trump administration, I feel like where I'm finding that I need to go towards it for my community is immigration and DACA and immigration reform. And so I look at the feminist movement and I don't see that that's a concern of them for them, and it makes me real disappointed but not surprised. Because if we look at the history, we see that the experiences of certain people have been excluded, and the voices have been excluded. And when they're included, they're highlighted for a little bit to be like, oh, look, there were Black women at the march. You know, there was Latina women at the march. This is intersectional feminism. But then that's it. It's like your intersectional feminism, it's not enough to have different colored people for that to be intersectional feminism. It has to address issues of those people for it to be intersectional. And so
that's what they think is like, oh my gosh, look how colorful the march is.
Yeah.
Look at how colorful our lineup is for our concert segment. Look how colorful the politicians are that are represented. And it's like, no, that's not enough.
Yeah.
That isn't enough, because the thing about intersectionality that I think it's downplayed a lot, and that we underestimate most, is class. And oftentimes you cannot separate when you're talking about race. Oftentimes you're also talking about class, but we don't forefront it enough. And so when you're talking about Black women and mortality rates, you're not talking about, or you're a lot of times you're most often not talking about the highest income Black women. Yeah. Like, that is an issue that is most concentrated among poor Black women. That just, it just is a thing. Like, the working class Black community is plagued with those issues the most. When you're talking about, just a whole host of issues. And so to ignore the issues affecting women of color, you're also ignoring issues affecting poor women. And there are poor white women. Yeah. But their issues are not a concern either. So it's like feminism, or the mainstream feminist movement, is both racist and classist, because we ignore the issues facing issues with healthcare. Yeah, yeah. You don't see mainstream feminists talking about that or addressing that. It's not like, oh my gosh, like, these women were able to, like, say pregnant women giving birth. If you can walk into the hospital and your insurance just covers everything, or you can just pay out of pocket and not leave the hospital and then get slammed with the medical bill 9 months down the line and find out that, oh my gosh, first touch that they make sound so cute and everything actually costs, a crazy amount of money.
Yeah, they charge you for bonding with your baby.
Exactly. And so that is classist. That is classist. The fact that poor women cannot bond with their baby after they birth it because they can't afford to is classism. But you don't see white mainstream feminism talking about that, because to them it doesn't even occur to them that could be an issue. It's like, for them, it's like, oh, what's $900? Of course I want to touch my baby. Like, I don't care how much it costs. I want to touch my baby. But no, like, I can get so hyped up about this.
Yeah, no. So I think I'm just ultimately really glad we had this conversation, not only so that we could kind of just highlight to people, one, like, just the time of how feminism has changed, but also how feminism, when you say feminism, like, there's certain assumptions that come with it. And so I think it was really important for us, for you as a Black woman, for me as a Latina woman, to express our experiences, you not being a feminism, me being a feminist, you not being a feminist, me being a feminist, but both having issues that impact us as women and women of color, and feeling like this movement, this mainstream movement, these movements that are spearheaded by a lot of white women aren't really addressing the issues that are most important to us. And so I'm really glad we had this space to be able to, if not only let people know that not, you know, or for me, like, not all feminists have the same, like, there are some of us who are really unhappy with the movement right now. And for you to be able to say, like, you can care about gender equality and not align yourself with this movement. And so I'm looking forward to any feedback. I know, like, people must have a lot of questions and feedback, and we're really excited, and I'm just really excited to have this conversation, and hopefully this can continue with you guys at home and with your friends, and you can bring this up and say, yo, did you know you can be intersectional and not a feminist? And, like, hopefully gets you to ask your friends, like, are you a feminist? And they can feel comfortable to say, maybe I'm not, or I'm unhappy with the way that I feel that I'm excluded. And maybe you don't feel excluded, but maybe this will highlight that there are people right next to you that do. And so just
thanks so much for listening.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Once again, if you have any feedback, if you have any questions, please email us at woke.ishpodcast@gmail.com. That's woke.ishpodcast@gmail.com. Also, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Our Instagram is at wokeishpodcast, and our Twitter is at wokeishpod. Keep a lookout on our IG. We're going to give a preview of our next topic, and we look forward to hearing from you. Feel free to DM us, email us, however you want to let us know. We're super approachable. And until next time.
Bye.